And we're in. Do. Welcome to the update for the comic spread and cover project. So, a lot has happened since the last video. I've been going through and blocking in the rest of the scene. I think I've got an image open here. Yeah. So this is what the shot looks like with all the colors blocked in. Within that last video, I took you through the steps for one of the frames on how I'm going to be approaching the painting. And I tried to make it pretty clear that if I wasn't just doing this one frame, that I would develop the entire scene at one time. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. So I completed all of the color blocking. That's all done. And now I'm going through and doing my shadows. And I'm doing my shadow pass throughout the entire scene all at once. So this means that anywhere that you see the wallpaper within my shot, then that's all on one layer. I'm going to hold down Control and select the icon for that layer that has all the wallpaper with it. And then I'm going to go through, I'm going to paint my shadows at the same time on every one of those walls. And that's going to help to keep my entire design and my choices consistent. And then I can start to make global decisions about these things as well. I ended up changing the wall color quite a few times and doing some different things. At first, it was sort of too dark and too muddy. Um, and see where we left off at. We talked about how, within this one shot here, the important part is the blue stone. This guy's butt, while I do like the shape of it, is not that important to be able to tell the story. So now when we actually look at this thing, the butt has been shadowed and it's been dropped back quite a bit. And you can see, how much different this entire shot looks with those items within the foreground. Let's zoom in on him so we can do sort of a side-by-side comparison with those items within the foreground, the pack of smokes, the lighter, and the bottle of whatever beverage it is that he's drinking side by side, how much that starts to drop all those items back, and how much of these things get left in the shadows, right? All those little details on the right-hand side of the bottle fade out, but they're still essential to be able to have in there. Don't worry about it. It's going to help tell your story quite a bit better. I'll just show you a quick example here. So as I was saying a second ago, I've got one layer called wall shadow that has got the shadows for all of my walls. And when I click off that layer, all the shadows on all those walls disappears. I've also turned down the brightness of the wall. Like I said, there's some adjustment that happened on a global scale just to make sure that it looked good and looked right. I also added a little bit more red tint to the back walls so that they feels like I need to add that red tint to the back wall here as well. But yeah, so that they match with the overall color scheme. Here's another interesting example of moving from, fully completing the color blocking and showing how much adding the shadows can help. So within these first three frames here, bring it up, zoom it in so you can see it. Within the first three frames, you can see that these walls are really, really blank and uninteresting looking, but I knew that there's going to be a light source coming from the stage and that I was going to be shading a lot of this stuff. The ground is entirely too bright and fighting against the rest of the shot, so I knew that I was going to drop this lighting down, that these tables were all going to get shaded. And now all of a sudden, when we look at this, it's all starting to come together and work very nicely. Please keep in mind that the blue stone, which is the title of this comic book and the spread here, is going to be glowing. So that's going to be in contrast. We've got the yellows and the oranges and the reds, and then we've got the blue stone. That's going to be the brightest, most saturated thing on this page. So it should stand out and give some nice lighting effects to these entire regions and be a pretty good through line throughout the entire throughout each one of the spreads. And I hope that you guys are starting to get the idea here that I'm doing all my shadows working from the very back of my scene and then working to the foreground. I haven't done the characters yet. I'm saving those for last, but I want to go ahead and establish my lighting throughout all of my shots. And let's see here. So other interesting things that are happening, compositionally, there's some cool little tricks that I'm using. What I want to show you within this video is we shaded a character in the last video. For this one, I think we're in a pretty good spot to start adding in those text boxes and giving you kind of a breakdown on how to do those. But there's some other little polished tips before we get into the text boxes that I want to talk to you about. Um, Namely, this refrigerator over here, which I think is a great setup to talk about some stuff that happens within design. And then compositionally, you know, with the previous videos, you can see how much they changed from my very, very rough sketches into the final lockups and drawings that I've created. But sort of narratively and visually, there's some cool repetition that's going on here. So in the top of the shot on this page, we've got the gal sitting. All of a sudden, the stone's going to start to glow a little bit. She notices it a little bit more. She starts looking around. And then over here on the right-hand side, she gets up and she walks away. But in the background, we've got the curtains that we've established. The curtains are getting bigger. And then all of a sudden, she is framing herself within the curtains. The same thing is going to happen with this window as she's starting to appear. So we've got her walking in. She will be blue at the end. That's the plan. She's going to be blue. And then as she steps forward, she goes behind the curtains again. So it's mirroring compositionally what's going on here in the top right-hand shot. Now, with her coming in, and she will be blue eventually, we see the same thing with this guy that's starting to show up, which leads us into we've already trained our audience on this page that when they start to appear and materialize, that they're blue at first and then they become more solid. Well, that's what's happening here is that, this guy is starting to show up. He's going to have a little bit of blue around him. There's going to be a lot of effects when I get to the final thing. So this big old dark space here that's not really doing anything too interesting, man, we could do all kinds of weird abstract expressionist brushstrokes and all kinds of other fun things with all the other characters that we're going to see stepping through their different timelines. And yeah, all of this blue goo here that doesn't look like much right now, that's going to get the same treatment as the blue stone. So it's going to be really glowy and have a whole bunch of different colors on the inside of it, and lighting effects are going to be going on. So this whole scene here is going to transform quite a bit, especially, all these little flames where it's getting separated down at the bottom. That's going to look quite different by the time I get to the very end. So I've got some tricks up my sleeve for this composition as I continue to work through it that are going to move the viewer's eye successfully through the piece. And that's kind of the goal here is when you're working in digital illustration, you've got a bag of tricks. We've got our lines of action, the flow of the composition, and with sequential art, the same thing happens of how someone is always going to start on the top left-hand side if they're from America, and or if that's the way they traditionally read, they'll start in the top left-hand side. They'll work their way down through this maze visually that you're creating down to the lower right-hand side. And that's along that path and along that journey, you can have all types of fun with it. A good way to think about this as well is that each one of these panels that I'm creating are pretty strong, right? They could exist as a still from an animated movie or from as a painting in and of themselves. And that with these, I don't know how many panels I have here. Each one of them has got a lot of narration. It's got good composition and structure to it for the most part. I think that some of the frames are not quite as strong. I've talked about this one in a previous video, but yeah, this frame really, really boring. This one, not all that interesting as well either, but it's okay. We're making up for it with the reaction shot, and we'll call those two sort of the calm before the storm as these characters actually start to meet for the first time. And yeah, so before we get into those boxes, let's go through and talk about the refrigerator and what's going on there. So Sometimes within your compositions, you're not really painting yourself into a corner. How to describe this? It's more of I've got a massive shape here and I don't know what to do with it. Let me describe what I mean. So when I look at this with my kind of artist designer's eyes, I've got, you know, a good amount of space, interesting stuff is going on over here. It's a good balance of small objects, um, black and white negative space, different textures, and things are happening. However, on the right-hand side, we've got this refrigerator, and the refrigerator needs to be there to show sort of some of the more modern day objects and give a good separation between these cocktail tables that I've been using in other areas within this shot or in the introduction, kind of show that they're, you know, that's the fun part visually about this is that I've got the wood floor, the tiles here. And then the guy in the red jacket, he's coming from the outdoors. So he's standing in some grass, and that's where we're getting these sort of bushes around him, and showing these three distinct sort of grounds to be able to show that they're in three different distinct places or where these characters are coming from. So I think that's kind of fun. The fridge has to be there. I guess I could have put something else, maybe, but anywho, so visually what's going on here is we've got a big blank shape. That is a whole lot of gray in this one final frame that's supposed to be the big ta-da moment within our scene. How can we make this more visually interesting? In the same way that I've been infusing a little bit of the red into the wallpaper so that it matches with more of the reds and the earthy tones that I'm using throughout the scene, the reason why this refrigerator doesn't look like it quite belongs is because it's the biggest area of just solid gray. There's nowhere else on here that's just got that particular gray within it. So it sort of stands out compositionally as a sore point. Now, my solution for that is it gives me the insight that likely this is an opportunity for me to be able to paint in more subtle colors. So let's take one of our random little kind of red colors that we're using and some of those yellows as well and see what we can do with it. Now, mind you, I've still got my lighting to paint within this scene, and I can throw some blue light that's sort of reflecting off the fridge in interesting ways. Maybe we can pull in a little bit of the yellow from her scene or her space on there as well. But when I've got a big open canvas like this, these two kind of visual windows on a diagonal, this is an opportunity for me to be able to play with sort of abstract expressionism and work in some subtle values within my scene. I hope that that makes sense. So we're basically doing an abstract painting, and I'm at 100%. Let's turn this down, 43%. Talked in the other videos about working with lighter colors. Actually, I've got a good example of how to be able to make a big, boring space much more interesting. I can show you let me pull this up. I know what the end of this looks like. I've done it before. Okay. Yep. 40s and 50s. There she is. All right. This guy. Here we go. So, same deal, right? Same shape problem as the front of the fridge, where we have got within this shot, a giant box that is not that interesting. It's just a big bulbous shape. But when it comes to the painting of it, I've been able to do some really, really interesting things to make this box feel interesting. on the screen instead of just having it be one flat color. And I think a lot of beginning artists um, struggle with this and don't quite know what to do with these types of spaces. So let me give you some insight here. And this is almost looks like chalk pastel or maybe oil pastel that I'm building up here. But this big purple area that our mind reads as purple, when we get in close to it, we can see that there is a whole plethora of different colors and textures and things that are happening within this shot. You can see that we've got purples, oranges, a little dark purple that's going on in there, some sort of mid, sort of lighter purples that are happening, a dark brown that's going on. And then the same thing is happening with the front of the box where the light is hitting as well. It's not just a one single bright color. Instead, I'm going through and I'm really painting the junk out of this box. You can see how many different strokes and lines there are that's going on here. Same thing is happening. It's almost like cross hatching that I'm doing with the pink. Got the tans. By using my textured brush, I'm getting some good speckles that are going on here. And as it transitions from the light to the middle color, we're getting a whole bunch of different textures that are layered up through there as well. And then, there's some interesting other things that are going on. That's your solution. When you end up with a really boring shape that just doesn't look all that interesting and you don't know how to fill it, this sort of abstract expressionism, layering of the different shapes, and pulling in the colors from the rest of the scene in very subtle ways is going to be your solution. Yeah, here's how all those shots ended up looking together. This was really, really tricky. Oh, it's like I've got a movie of it. This one. So this shot was really tricky for me also because I had just this massive amount of ground space and I worked quite a bit to be able to figure out how to be able to fill this big boring ground space with something that actually felt unique and interesting visually throughout the scene. So the same approach is happening here where we've got a lot of different texture that's going on, a lot of different building up of different values, pinks and purples and all kinds of things happening there. And then a gradient running all the way across it to be able to make the whole thing feel really kinetic, polished, and like you put some work into it. And I think that it reads that way when we see this particular shot. So without all that stuff there, this is a very, very boring and uninteresting composition. And when you find sometimes with these boring and uninteresting compositions, it is giving you room to be able to play with the texture in unexpected areas, which is exactly what we're starting to do with this refrigerator over here. So we don't want to make the refrigerator look like it's totally uh, dilapidated and crummy. I am using the textured brush here, but there's going to be a pass with the smudge tool here in a second to be able to clean up some of these lines. So at first, I'm just dropping in some random colors or that first kind of color pass. Now I know that I've got some room to be able to probably add in some of this golden yellow as well, which I haven't really used too much in other spaces. And, if I had more time with each one of these frames, then I would do the exact same thing with the floor. I would do the same thing with the tablecloths and anywhere else that I find big, large planes within my shot. Let's just make the choice that's going to be a little bit more yellow towards the ground. I just, for whatever reason, a little bit more yellow here down at the base, just so that we're starting to make some kind of design decisions about this big boring thing. Now, this also applies within your shadow space and structure as well. We can add, the shadows don't just have to be a boring gray here. We can add some other tones and flavor to them. We've got some of the brown that we've got up on top. There we go. And let's put just a little bit of rusty color around there. I know, doesn't look all that great right now. We're going to smooth all these things out in just a moment, but I think we're starting to get some of the key values that I'm looking for. There's also going to be blue that's on it. I think we're in a pretty good spot after we smooth this thing. So using my smudge tool, most of the time when I use the smudge tool, it's more of a wiggle. So I'm just kind of going up and down with it, or left and right, and trying to be really controlled so that I'm losing some of those grunge marks that were being created with the previous brush. That one's a little bit too obvious there. So there's another blur. You know, I love it that Photoshop, they thankfully are giving us more new types of blurs with every update. There we go. Cool. So now we're starting to get quite a few more tones on there, and this thing is becoming a lot more interesting than it was before. So no tones with the tones. Yeah, visually quite a bit better. Let's go in and I'm going to go to my filter drop down. Very rarely do I ever use these filters within Photoshop. I try not to, but sometimes it's just going to work better. So we got this thing called a surface blur. And there it is. So the surface blur, I cannot explain to you exactly how this thing is working. We're going to turn it down to about half there. And that did a nice job of smoothing out all those extra colors that I just put into it. So now previously, where this refrigerator was standing out like a sore thumb, let's zoom back on the entire page, turn it off, and see just that big block of gray in the bottom right-hand side. Now all of a sudden, its colors are starting to meld and match with the rest of the scene, at least a little bit better, or at least it's got some camo on it. There's my shadow layer. So real quick, I'm right clicking with my selection tool. I hit V on the keyboard to get to my selector. And then I've got auto select turned off when I hit V on the keyboard. I right click with my mouse and that brings up my layer numbers. And I'm right clicking over the region that I want to get to. And that, my friends, is how I jump around within my layers lightning fast within Photoshop. And then I'm just creating a new layer. With my Photoshop here, that's a good time. Yeah, maybe haven't seen any of these other videos. I talked about this way in the very beginning and never mentioned it again. But Photoshop over the years has kind of become a bully when it comes to how many different windows and how much screen space they want to open up. Try and be cognizant when you're working within this program of, am I actually using any of the uh, stuff that Photoshop out of the box opens up? If not, you can probably close it. If you haven't used Photoshop that much, you don't know what you're going to use. But, if you've gone through this entire series and haven't touched any of that stuff, you can probably go away within your UI UX. For the most part, I was using the characters a second ago. I don't need that, so I'm going to close it. But I like to only have the essentials. I like to have my navigator open, my layers, and then my work panel. I like to have the rulers on as well, just because that makes it a little bit faster. If I need to divide something, but I don't like it when I'm painting and the paintbrush tries to attach itself. Um, to those rulers. So if you get close to the ruler and you try to draw, it's almost like a magnet thing, and your line will get pulled over to it and it won't be as clean as you want it to be. Suppose you can probably lock the rulers, but it still tends to happen to me. I don't know. All right, so there we go. Just giving that a little bit more shape. And that's okay. That fridge has got some kind of doctoring, so I hope that that gives you guys something to think about. If you run into an area that is big and flat and boring, it is a great opportunity for you to be able to introduce some of those colors from the rest of your composition and the rest of your scene into that big open space. And you can do it in a way that again, is like abstract expressionism or modern art. If I was to take this weird little tile that I just created, blow this up on a giant canvas, that's the size of a wall. You could probably sell it for quite a bit of money in a museum, and it'd look great in corporate office space somewhere. Okay. Um, Neat. Now we've got lettering to go through and do. Let's hit Control S, save out. So my lettering is going to go on top of everything that I've created here previously. And you want to be able to do this in two stages. Ideally, okay, let's back up. So the Marvel way was, I think Stan Lee would write all the stories at first and they were scripted. Then the artist would draw them. It wasn't always that way. Previously, when Jack Kirby was there in the beginning, he would draw the entire pages, and then the comic writer would come in and try and make sense of all this stuff and fill in the story itself. Um, I have not written this story or the dialogue yet, so we're making this stuff up on the fly, but I do have some concepts. And what I'm looking for here is thinking about the flow of the reader and how they're going to be able to work their way through this thing. Also, within my compositions, how much space do I really have? What kind of stuff do I want to get rid of? Now, within this, we've got some good dialogues that are going on between the two characters, but we've also got thought bubbles. So the thought bubbles or the sort of narrative squares, sometimes they're hand drawn out and other times they can just be boxes. Um, we're going to make boxes this time, just so they're a little bit easier to to manipulate. So right now I've got my shape selector and we've got a stroke of 8 points that's turned to this black color. Open that guy up, grab it so that it's the same color as it's not quite a pure black. There we go. As the box lines. We can always change this later on, which is great. And now we need a fill. So we don't have any white on my scene anywhere yet. So let's grab one of my brightest colors and we're going to go in and just have it just be a little bit off white. If it's pure white, it's going to be too jarring, and that's going to be a little bit softer on the viewer's eyes. So what do we need to tell? We can assume that probably earlier in this comic book, we're spending a lot of time with this character, and now all of a sudden we're sort of jumping into something else. We could tell the story of a nightclub. So let's check out this thing right here. The stroke around the outside of this is really, really thick. So let's make it 4 points. And now that weight is not nearly as strong. So we can say like nightclub 1926 or something like that, if we want to, just to give it some kind of, or, just have it say like meanwhile up there, something like that. There's all our properties. Again, I don't really need all this stuff right now, so we're just going to hide it. And now I'm going to create a new rectangle. This property is going to jump up each time I make one. One good thing that you can do here is a hang line. It looks like Photoshop is going ahead and trying to find the hang line. A hang line is lining up the tops of these boxes so that they hang down at the same space. This is a great visual way to be able to kind of connect where the viewer is supposed to look and go. That'll give me some good little writing space. We do have a whole bunch of blank space down here in the bottom right-hand side. That's not really all that interesting or doing anything. That's sort of a indicator that I could probably squeeze something else in there. And I do like my little napkins on the floor. I spent so much time trying to render those. So the rules of layout still apply. You can have these boxes go over uh, to sort of visually move the story along. So if I want to, that means that I can open this box up even further. There we go. So you get the hang line. Hitting Control T to be able to get to my global scape. This one could work pretty good for a thought bubble for her. Let's go up to 80, see what happens. Nope, 90. No, let's go to 100 and 110. There we go. All right, so we got 110. Different shape. So this is the first time we've got two narrations, one thought bubble coming from her. Then to be able to move this over for her actually thinking, what do? Oh, you're going to draw it. This is just one layer of the top of that bubble. Hard edge, opacity, turn off the weight. Also do this with the pen tool. It'd probably be a lot cleaner. There we go. That looks funny. Let's get rid of those nubs. Okay. There we go. Now it feels like a thought bubble that's coming from her and duplicate. Control T. Have her say one more little thing over here and sort of visually lead the viewer's eye just a little bit more. Same deal. We'll probably be doing this on two separate layers, but here we are. There we go. So now we've got two different thought bubbles, and I am going to be changing and writing and adjusting my dialogue for what these characters are actually saying. So we got really round ones for the thought bubbles. And now I'm going to take this rectangle, duplicate it again, give that one a color just so that I can remember that's the one with the edges. So I've got my cool painting here that I really love so much, but it's not all that important for my properties. Let's go with 50. Nope, 25. All right, so sometimes with the narration, that can end up being a different color. So let's go with a fill and cause it to be this color, but we want to go up, lighter. All right, so grab that one. Now it's holding onto our colors. So now we've got two that are sort of an alternative color, and this is helping to separate our thoughts, our global narration from the thoughts from what it is the character is actually saying. So even with their thoughts, we can give that a different color if you want to. You can change it slightly. We're going to keep the blue. There we go. That feels pretty good to me. No, it can probably be lighter. Pink, let's leave it that way for now. I think that this is all working pretty nicely. Okay. And so I'm just trying to figure out where you can see that this is all working pretty good. It's not really distracting or taking away from my composition in any kind of way. All those elements are there. The boxes through the top are starting to work nicely with the entire scene. And it's not hurting the overall composition in any kind of big way. Like the idea that this film might be a little bit inebriated, but I want to show you some of the other styles that we can do here with these. So let's pull this in just a little bit more and have it move over. Going back to my top layer. So what I'm going to do now is connect these two boxes. And then if this guy is sort of grumbling, see if we can make that look a little bit better. Grumble, grumble, grumble. Not the cleanest way to do this, but I think that's making the point. And I'm trying to show you guys that there are a couple different looks and feels for how we can approach these speech bubbles. So once you've got the general size, it doesn't really matter. Um, I think it's me because I'm an illustrator and not a writer. I think it's more important to make sure that, especially on a demo project like this you're putting within your portfolio, that those boxes look really nice within the entire scene. So there we go. Now we've got some room for him to sort of mumble, 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 and then say what it is that he's going to say. So within each one of these shots, I don't want to make this too repetitive. Probably a thought bubble rectangle, duplicate right here. So what's the important thing? We've got the shot in the upper left-hand side. I love his hand, but it's not really all that important. So we've got a pretty good system that we've created up until this point. I like visually the idea of sort of making even his thoughts a little bit more jumbled. So they've got a little bit more of a rougher edge around them, but for the sake of time, we're not going to do that. Let's within the Spawn comics, man, it's always worth going back to Todd McFarlane here and looking at the layouts. And let's look at some other examples real quick. Non-traditional examples of how they handle the text. That's sort of what we're setting up right here. And read Spawn Comics. I'm gonna, there it is. Whenever Spawn talks. Nice. All we're getting is this page. But whenever Spawn is speaking, he always has this sort of ripped piece of paper look around him. That's really iconic. And the font sort of matches that gravelly voice that he might have as well. Now there's darkness in my soul, and you can see that it's got kind of a different style that's going on with it, that same sort of gravelly look. And let's see if this evolves or changes anywhere. So there's our traditional sort of speech bubble. You can see that they're in non-traditional shapes. That one's got a gray outline around it, which is really funky. You can see that they're using white panels around the characters here, which is pretty unique and pretty interesting. Yeah, looks like he likes to use the gray outlines that the character is yelling. And you can see there they've got more expressive text inside of the speech bubble also. Yep, Spawn monologuing on with his thoughts. There's an example of them having a couple different colors that are happening inside of there also. But I want to show you guys text lockup techniques as well once we're actually writing inside of these boxes. So that's the process that I'm going to go through and do. But the rest of the scene is, I've established a hierarchy. I've got my thought bubbles, I've got the speech bubbles, and the two different looks that are going on for them. Yeah, you could certainly do a drop shadow, but be careful with the drop shadows, man. You can definitely do some animated text of him going "Arg!" right here. She shows up, and this is such a good spot to be able to have. Duplicate layer. Or saying something, and then we can get the expressive text. So that's something important to show you as well. Size 300. There we go. Ah, arg, not, there we go. Ag. I think that's a good guttural sound right there. So there's probably a official comic book text that you could find somewhere out there for big expressive text that someone's made. But that font looks pretty good. I think it's going to work well for me. I could do lots of different color treatments on this in just a moment, but for now, time to get bending this font. So let's go to, I'm right clicking on my layer and I'm going to rasterize the layer type. Let's scale it down. and we want this thing to be able to fit. So now we're going to go to image, transform, and let's go to warp. Bring the A down by his mouth. Make sure that the letters are staying readable. And he's really yelling that right across her head right now, which is really hurting the edge of her hair. I don't want that to happen too much. And let's open up the H just a little bit more at the end. There we go. Ah, looks good. Rotate it. We're going to put that right around this character's head. So let's give it a color. So it's not just black. And I'm going to go with my color overlay. That's that color overlay. Normal, check. And let's give it that color. Ugh. And now to give it some emphasis, let's give it a stroke. And we've been using this red really, really sparingly throughout my shot. That looks pretty good. And let's change the size of that. It's working nicely. Again, we said be careful with the drop shadow. You don't want it to be too fuzzy or too demanding. Let's go with the distance and turn that opacity all the way up. And where do we want this? All right, distance, bring it up there. And now let's bring down the opacity on it and change it to, again, that red color. Cool. So that's looking pretty good. Scale it down just a little bit so that it fits within my frame better. It's competing with her hair just a little too much. And I don't like that it's not quite fitting into the frame the way that I want it to. So comic books, the rules of text don't apply quite as much, or we can break the rules just a little bit more. So there we go. Now we've got a really nice piece of expressive text going on for the Og right around there. As he starts to turn around, things are looking pretty good. It takes that long. I typed it out. I used the warp tool to be able to shape the text and bend it very, very quickly. I've got a color overlay, a stroke, and then a drop shadow, which again, I'm not trying to use pure black because that's just going to be too heavy and too strong, but that's looking like comic book text now in a pretty strong way. So let's go in here and let's start typing some stuff out. I think I probably have Comic Sans within here. The text itself, can it be black? Yeah. Is it going to look a little bit softer on the viewer's eyes if we use just something a little bit up from black? Yeah, most likely. All right, so we are way too big right now, and we're in Berlin. Let's see what I have a Comic Sans. There she is. 50. Now, Photoshop has never really been, let's go down to 25. I'm going to go smaller than that. Let's go with 18. Yeah, 18 looks right. Okay. So Photoshop's never really been all that great with text. It's not what the program is built for. However, with the text box, you can go through and you can draw out where you want that text to actually go. And I'll fill it in with lorem ipsum. This is the worst dialogue ever. Oh my gosh, that wall just completely broke away. Okay, so here's an interesting thing that happens, right? Oh my gosh, that wall just completely broke away. Had to have been, and we're letting the audience fill in his thoughts. It had to have been intentional, right? Now, let's off click this text, and I just want to check a few things with the text. And this is something that you're going to want to look for as well if you're doing sequential art. So, for the most part, this is working good. The text feels balanced within the box. But I want to pull it in just a little bit more here and there on the edges so that my spacing around the sides and the top and bottom feels good. What I'm talking about here is gutter space and the padding. So the padding is the idea that we are leaving enough room around the edges of our text so that it does not feel too cramped and we've got some breathing space. If you do this and you keep this little rule in the back of your mind, your text is going to feel nice and clean and beautiful within these boxes. It's going to feel really, really good. If you don't do that, then things are going to feel off. And you can see the text size to box size ratio that I've got here. And that visually looks correct. We don't want to make our text too large. We don't want to make it too small. There is a Goldilocks zone here for sure. And so now I'm going to do the next thing. I want to show you guys some issues that you might run into. Now, what I left out here is in the word intentional because intentional would not fit in there. So let's say intentionally the horos, no, scope. I'm trying to get it to where one of the words gives me a hyphen at the end. So let's go back up. And if it breaks the word, potentially the horoscope for today told me to wear green. Sure. Okay. um, those hyphens that sometimes appear that break the word in two aren't things that you really want to occur unless you are really painting yourself into a corner with the dialogue. Um, Make sure that you're setting up your pacing and what it is that you're saying. Stay loose with it is what I'm trying to describe to you here. Is it's important to understand what you want to say, but you're creative. There are 1,000 different ways to say what it is that you're trying to get across. So if you've got a text box here, what's more important? So visually, what's more important within the scene, right? I could make the text box absolutely massive, but then I'm covering up what is the most important part of the shot, which is this blue stone that he's seeing for the first time, right? We're using the text box right now and where this terminates as a visual line to get the audience's eye onto the blue stone. Um, pretty cool little trick that's going on here. And if you feel like you're trying to say entirely too much and the dialogue is sort of leaning, just going on and on and on forever, then that's the beauty of sequential art because we can have the character continue that same thought within the next frame, right? The conversation can continue. So, if we had something really big and important that's going on here, then it probably makes sense to break this up over here in a thought that he's continuing, and this is actually what he says out loud. Um, so sort of the thoughts before the most of the time before the stuff that's actually said. And not every panel has got to have dialogue within it. You can have some silent ones that are going on here, but this would be another one, where he could be sort of grumbling, like, now what the heck is this thing? Or, even just a little box that shows like confusion, dot, 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 dot. What the heck is this? Now that he's actually holding it, he's trying to figure it out. And that's your chance to be able to put an emote with the text to help the audience understand what the character's thinking. They do this within anime and manga all the time, and that can be a good little spot for one of those. But you can see how within this page over here on the left-hand side, these boxes, all this stuff that I'm creating, put it all in a folder real quick so we can turn it on and off, is not hurting my overall composition. I am losing a little bit of that lovely chandelier that I really did not want to go through and shade and paint that much. But you can see how it's working with the composition. I'm not losing too much stuff anywhere within the scene in too big of a way. And it's the boxes are an accoutrement. They are helping the overall composition within the page, not hurting it. And I'm sort of dipping and diving and weaving in a very natural way, thinking about the hierarchy of the text, how viewers are going to read these things, um, and you know, the way that I'm using the text boxes to pull the viewer's line, and then move their eyes over to the next frame when they're ready. There was a really really cool, I think it was Daredevil. Comic that I used to use as an example years ago. See if we can find it. It was either Daredevil or Hawkeye. Daredevil comic panel storytelling. Maybe it was this recent Green Arrow run. It's either Green Arrow or Daredevil is one of the two. Okay. Either way, I think this will get us here. Cool. So for this one, it's not his fault, but I can't believe I lasted this long. I know he needs me, but I can't go back to the room. I just can't. Maddie, you there? And, the cool part is, like I was saying, sometimes they don't always have to have text. Sometimes you can give a moment of pause and then the reaction for the character. He kind of collects himself, he puts his smile on, pushes up his glasses, and now he's back in frame and he's ready to do what it is that he needs to do next. And I think that this is really, really good pacing and storytelling. If we look at the sizes of the frames, the first one, nice and bright, we lose the background, and then we're moving to brightness again towards the end. This one gets brighter when he's in this little dark space, and then it gets really, really thin and small there while he's in his own head and his thoughts. And now we expand back out at the end. I think it's a really, really cool panel sequence for the storytelling that's going on. And these are, I'm not sure if it's a redraw. I think it, I think it's a copy and paste, but they changed some small little details on it just to make it not feel quite so copied and pasted. But yeah, really nice. So with that, think about it. I know it's a lot of ideas that I'm putting out there in some scenes. What's the most important part within these three, right? It's not really about him. He's just kind of like, what the hell? I've got this glowing rock. the important part here that I want the audience to focus on isn't what his dialogue is, it's her materializing within the space. And so this could be a really, really good example of something that doesn't need dialogue, but maybe he's right in the middle of one little thought, and then all of a sudden, you know, you could do some more of the maybe a thump, and now we get the big reaction. Or this is one where she says something, and again, if she's going to say something, then we have to figure out a spot to put it. Um, Maybe right in the middle of his back here, where it says "excuse me" or "hey," and now all of a sudden he turns around and we get the big reaction, and then she just says something else really smooth and slick there. But yeah, it's starting to come along, and there's a couple different routes that I can take with this thing. But by the time we get to the end of it, we will have good dialogue, good overall scene composition. Remember that I used the rectangles. They are not on a pure white. Instead, I'm using a slightly off white here because the pure white can be a little bit hard on your eyes when you're looking at it. Notice that I've changed the background color as well within this page so that it's a dark brown. The black for the frames is still standing out here, but all of it's starting to come together and look like a comic. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. I'm going to wrap it up here and get back to rendering these characters. But yeah, next steps. Next time you see this, we should be further along. We should have all the lighting, most of the characters totally rendered out, and then going back and doing just some little polish right here at the very end. I'll show you, talk to you about the cover in the next video as well. So stay tuned, and thanks for checking this out. Hope this gave you some good tips.